Walter Bramble, and the postbox that whispered. It was nearly closing time at Willowmere's little post office, and the last of the afternoon had gone the colour of weak tea. Walter Bramble stood at the sorting bench, sleeves rolled, spectacles balanced on his nose. The counter was almost empty. The big oak clock ticked its unhurried way towards 6. Only one sack of post remained, the final delivery of the day. And Walter loved this part more than any other, because the last post of the day was always the quietest. No rush of morning letters, no queue at the window. Just him and the envelopes, and the hush that settled over the street outside like a second blanket. He loosened the string on the sack and let the first envelope slide into his hand. It was thick, cream-coloured, addressed in a shaky, careful hand. The hand of someone who had written slowly, wanting every word to land just so. A birthday card, Walter thought, for a granddaughter, perhaps. He pictured the writer at a small kitchen table, a cup of tea gone cold beside them, smiling as they signed their name. Walter didn't open it. He never did. But for a moment he held it to the lamplight, and it seemed to him that the paper knew things. Every envelope, he reckoned, carried a little of the hand that wrote it, the weight of a good night, the hope of an answer, a secret folded flat as a pressed flower. And that night, as the last of the light slipped away, one envelope on the bench seemed to whisper back. Walter stood very still. Outside, a bicycle rattled over the cobbles and disappeared towards the green. Somewhere, farther along Willowmere High Street, a shopkeeper pulled down a blind. Inside the post office, the clock ticked. Tick, tick, tick. Walter looked at the envelope. It lay on top of the others, cream against brown wood, quite ordinary, except for one thing. There was no address, no stamp, no name, only a small drawing in one corner. A postbox. Walter picked it up. It was surprisingly warm. Not hot. More the temperature of a letter that had been carried inside somebody's coat. He turned it over. The flap was sealed. "Well," he murmured, "you've certainly not made matters easy." Walter placed it beside the lamp and continued sorting. There were electricity bills, catalogues, a postcard from Devon, 2 birthday cards, a seed catalogue intended for Mrs. Finch, and a parcel that smelled faintly of lavender soap. Ordinary post, ordinary people, ordinary lives moving quietly from one doorstep to another. Yet every few minutes, Walter's eyes returned to the blank envelope. It seemed to wait. By 5 minutes to 6, he had finished. He tied the empty sack, straightened the piles, and brushed a few scraps of paper from his cardigan. That was when he heard it again. A whisper. Not from the envelope this time. From outside. Walter looked through the window. The old red postbox stood across the road beneath the chestnut tree. It had been there longer than anyone could remember. Children had posted letters to Father Christmas in it. Soldiers had sent letters from it before catching trains away from Willowmere. Marriage proposals had gone through its narrow slot. Apologies, condolences, news of babies, news of deaths. Walter had always thought a postbox was rather like a kettle, simple, dependable, and highly unlikely to whisper. He put on his coat and crossed the empty road. The evening air smelled of damp leaves and chimney smoke. Walter stood beside the postbox. "Right," he said. Nothing happened. He leaned closer. "You called." Silence. Then, Walter. He stepped back. The voice had been so soft he might have imagined it. He leaned in again. Walter Bramble. This time there was no doubt. "What can I do for you?" The postbox answered with a tiny metallic sigh. "Find the letter." Walter frowned. "What letter?" But the postbox said nothing more. A light rain began to fall. Walter waited. "Could you possibly be a little more specific?" "Nothing." Walter sighed. "Very well." He returned to the post office, locked the front door, and picked up the blank envelope. "Find the letter," he repeated. It felt warm again. He slipped it into his inside pocket. He had just turned off the main lights when there came a tapping at the glass. Mrs. Finch stood outside in a green raincoat, carrying an umbrella that had somehow turned inside out. Walter let her in. "You forgot this." She held up a tin. "Shortbread." "I didn't forget it. You left it at my house." "That sounds remarkably like forgetting it." Mrs. Finch placed the tin on the counter and inspected him. "You look peculiar." "I'm tired." She continued staring. Walter sighed. "The postbox spoke to me." Mrs. Finch nodded. "Which one?" Walter stared at her. "The red one outside." "What did it say?" "Find the letter." "Well," she said, "that is inconveniently vague." "Exactly." Walter showed her the blank envelope. No address. No stamp. No name. "Have you opened it?" Walter looked offended. "I'm a postmaster." "You're retired." "I'm covering for Mr. Jenkins." Walter took the envelope back. "It isn't ours to open." Outside the rain strengthened. Only the small lamp above the sorting bench remained on. The room seemed warmer beneath it. Mrs. Finch looked around. "It feels different in here after closing." Walter nodded. "Full." "Full?" "Not crowded, just full." Thousands of messages had passed through the room over the years. Some written carefully, some hurried, some never answered. Perhaps places remembered things. Walter looked at the blank envelope again. What if the letter we're looking for was never sent? The clock struck 6. The final chime lingered. Then came a sound from outside. Clunk. The flap of the postbox had moved. There was nobody near it. Walter and Mrs. Finch crossed the road together. Walter unlocked the collection door. Inside lay one envelope. Just one. It was pale blue. On the front, Miss Edith Harrow, Rosebank Cottage, Willowmere. Mrs. Finch breathed in sharply. "Edith Harrow?" Walter knew the name too. Miss Harrow had been Willowmere's piano teacher. Small, straight-backed, and responsible for teaching half the village scales. She had died 12 years ago. Walter examined the envelope. No stamp, no postmark. On the back was a date. October 14th, 1974. "That," Walter said, "is a very late delivery." Rosebank Cottage stood at the far end of Willowmere beyond the church and the little stone bridge. Walter and Mrs. Finch walked slowly through the rain. Whatever had waited 52 years could presumably manage another 15 minutes. The cottage appeared behind a hedge of dripping privet. Its windows were dark. Walter tried the door. Locked. Mrs. Finch shone her torch through the sitting-room window. Furniture stood beneath sheets. Against the far wall sat a piano. Something pale rested on top. An envelope. Mrs. Finch angled the torch. Walter's name was written across it. Mr. Walter Bramble. On the back, October 15th, 1974. Walter stared. I was 9. Did you know Edith Harrow? She taught me piano. You played piano? Badly. How badly? Edith once suggested I consider the recorder. Mrs. Finch suppressed a laugh. At the back of the cottage, a kitchen window had been left slightly open. We are not climbing through windows, Walter said. Of course not. Mrs. Finch reached into her handbag and produced a long wooden spoon. Walter stared. You carry a wooden spoon? I carry many useful things. Using the handle, she managed to lift the catch. 5 minutes later, Walter was standing inside the kitchen. I should point out that this is technically trespassing. We're delivering post. That is not a defense. It ought to be. They entered the sitting room. The envelope lay on the piano. Walter picked it up. It was addressed to him, so he opened it. Inside was a single sheet. He read aloud. Dear Walter, if this letter ever reaches you, then I was right to trust the postbox. Tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock, a boy will come to Rosebank Cottage carrying a green umbrella. He will ask to use the telephone. Please let him. He will need to speak to his mother. Do not ask how I know. Some messages arrive early, others arrive late. The important thing is that they arrive when they are needed. Yours sincerely, Edith Harrow. Walter lowered the page. Mrs. Finch was silent. There's no telephone here, Walter said. Mrs. Finch stared. Of all the parts of that letter, that's what concerns you? It's the practical issue. From behind them came a soft note. Plink. They turned towards the piano. Another note. Then another. 3 dusty keys lowered slowly. C.E.G. Walter remembered Edith standing beside him years ago, tapping a pencil against the music stand. Again, Walter, but slower. Music is not running away from you. Another short melody played. Mrs. Finch moved towards a bookshelf. There. A music book stood between 2 hymnals. On the cover, Willowmere Children, Autumn Concert, 1974. Walter opened it. Halfway down the list of names was Daniel Vale. Piano duet. Walter knew the name. Daniel Vale had been a child in Willowmere. His daughter, Dr. Sarah Vale, now ran the village medical practice. Inside the book was an old photograph. Children sat around Edith's piano. One boy held a green umbrella. On the back, Edith had written, Daniel, rain again. Walter looked at Mrs. Finch. I think we should go home. I agree. Walter slept badly. Not because he was frightened, he was simply crowded with thoughts. At 1:30, rain began tapping his bedroom window. At 2, he dreamed of letters drifting through dark rooms. At 4, he gave up and made tea. By 7, the rain had stopped. Willowmere looked freshly washed. Walter returned to the post office at 9. The morning passed normally. Mrs. Finch appeared at 10 with currant buns. At 11, Mrs. Dalloway posted a parcel to Bristol. At 12, a spaniel escaped from the greengrocer and spent 7 cheerful minutes inside the post office. By 1, Walter had almost convinced himself that the previous evening had been peculiar but manageable. Then Dr. Sarah Vale walked in. She carried a stack of envelopes. "Morning, Walter." "Morning." While Walter stamped them, Sarah glanced towards the window. "Funny thing. My father mentioned this post office yesterday." Walter paused. "He's in a care home near Bath now. Dementia. Some days are better than others. I'm sorry." He suddenly asked whether the old postbox still stood outside. Walter looked through the window. "What did you say?" "That it did," Sarah smiled. Then he said, "Tell Walter I'm sorry I missed the telephone." Walter stopped. "No idea what he meant," Sarah said. "How old was your father in 1974? 9. Did he know Edith Harrow?" "His piano teacher." Sarah smiled. "He hated piano." Walter almost laughed. "Most of us did." At the door, Sarah turned. "My father used to tell a strange story. He ran away after an argument with his parents. He walked to Rosebank Cottage because he liked Miss Harrow, but she wasn't home." Walter said nothing. He wanted to telephone his mother because it had started raining and he was frightened. What happened? He walked home eventually. His mother had been frantic. After Sarah left, Mrs. Finch emerged from the greeting card rack where she had been pretending not to listen. Walter checked the date. Today was the 15th of October. The letter Edith had written on the 15th of October 1974 had said, "Tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock. Tomorrow. 16 October. Outside, the red postbox gave a quiet metallic clunk. Inside was another letter. This one addressed to Daniel Vale, Rosebank Cottage. On the back, 16th October 2026. Tomorrow. Mrs. Finch stared at it. Now that is showing off. Walter did not open Daniel's letter. Instead, he contacted Dr. Sarah Vale and arranged a video call with Daniel that evening. Daniel appeared on the screen, white-haired, thin, his eyes uncertain. Sarah sat beside him. "Dad, this is Walter Bramble." Daniel stared, then smiled. "Walter. We went to school together." Daniel nodded. "Piano?" "Yes." "Terrible." "Both of us." Walter showed him the old photograph. Daniel leaned closer. "That umbrella. You remember it? My mother's? Green?" "Green." Walter asked gently about the day he ran away. Daniel frowned. Father shouted. "What about?" "Nothing." Then Daniel said, "Everything feels enormous when you're 9. Walter nodded. "I walked to Edith's." "She wasn't there?" "No." "You needed the telephone." Daniel looked up sharply. "How do you know?" Walter hesitated. "Edith knew." Daniel whispered, "The postbox." "What about it?" "I told it." "Told it what?" That I wanted my mum. Daniel closed his eyes. I posted a note. What did it say? Please tell Mum I'm sorry. Walter's breath caught. Then the box whispered, Daniel said. What did it say? Daniel smiled faintly. Go home, Daniel. So I did. Sarah looked at him. Dad, you've never told me that. Daniel shrugged. Things disappear if you leave them long enough. Walter thought of letters. No, he said softly. Sometimes they wait. The following afternoon, Walter and Mrs. Finch returned to Rosebank Cottage. Walter brought a flask of tea. Mrs. Finch brought sandwiches, boiled sweets, the torch, and the wooden spoon. At 3:45 they sat in Edith's old sitting room. The piano waited in silence. Walter placed the cream blank envelope on top. Beside it lay Daniel's unopened letter. At 3:55, rain began softly. At 3:59, the garden gate squeaked. Walter looked through the window. A boy walked up the path, perhaps 10 years old. Yellow raincoat, green umbrella. The boy knocked. Walter opened the door. Is this Mrs. Harrow's house? No, not anymore. Oh. My phone died, the boy said. I need to ring my mum. Walter glanced at Mrs. Finch. He handed the boy his mobile. Mum? The boy turned away. Sorry, I'm okay. I missed the bus. His name was Toby. He had recently moved to Willowmere and had got off the school bus too early. The green umbrella belonged to his grandmother. Why did you come here? Walter asked. Toby shrugged. I saw the light upstairs. Walter glanced at Mrs. Finch. There was no electricity connected to the upper rooms. Before he could ask more, headlights appeared beyond the hedge. Toby's mother hurried up the path. Walter assured her nothing dreadful had happened. Toby left beneath the green umbrella. The rain faded. Mrs. Finch looked at Walter. Edith knew. Yes. 52 years ago, apparently. How? Walter thought. I don't know. Mrs. Finch smiled. Good. Occasionally not knowing is restful. They returned to the sitting room. Daniel's letter now lay in the center of the piano stool. Walter was certain neither of them had touched it. He picked it up. The paper was no longer warm. The cream envelope remained warm. Mrs. Finch noticed. That one isn't finished yet. No. The next morning, Walter sent Daniel's letter by registered post. 3 days later, Sarah telephoned. My father received your letter. How is he? Different. Walter waited. He cried. I'm sorry. No, not badly. She paused. He said it was from his mother. Walter gripped the phone. His mother? She died in 1998. What did the letter say? I didn't read it all, but there was one line he showed me. Sarah's voice softened. It said, "You came home. That was all I ever needed." Walter closed his eyes. He imagined a 9-year-old boy walking home through rain, a mother waiting at a window, words unsaid for 52 years. "Thank you," Sarah said. "I don't think I did very much." "You delivered it?" "Sometimes. That was enough." For nearly a week, nothing unusual happened. The blank envelope stayed in the locked drawer beneath the sorting bench. Still blank, still warm. The postbox remained silent. Life in Willowmere returned to its ordinary rhythm. Mrs. Finch complained about the price of butter. A blackbird repeatedly attacked its reflection in the chemist's door. Someone accidentally posted a shopping list: milk, potatoes, cat food, custard creams. Then, on Saturday evening, the whisper returned. "Walter." He closed his eyes. Of course. Walter crossed the road alone. The postbox stood beneath the chestnut tree. "Find the last one." Walter sighed. "You could be more specific." Silence. The flap moved. Inside was a postcard showing Willowmere Station many years ago. On the back were 3 words: Locker number 7. Walter walked to the station. Along platform 2, beneath an iron canopy, a row of old wooden lockers remained. He found number 7. On its door was a tiny, scratched postbox symbol. Walter touched it. The locker clicked open. Inside was a leather satchel. He opened the buckle. Letters filled the bag. Dozens. Some from the 1940s, others from later decades. All addressed to people in Willowmere. None stamped. Walter examined one. Mrs. Eleanor Pike, Mill Lane. Another, Thomas Finch, Church Row. Mrs. Finch's father. Then Margaret Bramble. The old rectory. Walter's mother. The date was 1963, 2 years before Walter was born. Walter sat on the platform for a long time. A train arrived and departed. Passengers crossed the platform. Nobody noticed the elderly man sitting with a bag full of lost letters. Eventually, Walter carried the satchel home. He did not open a single envelope. Mrs. Finch came early the next morning. She saw her father's name. "Oh, he died 30 years ago," Walter said. "I know." She recognized her mother's handwriting. After a moment, she opened it. Her eyes filled. Then she laughed. She was furious. What about? He'd forgotten their anniversary. Walter laughed too. "She says if he comes home with flowers, she'll forgive him." "Did he?" "Oh, yes. They stayed married another 32 years. Walter smiled. Perhaps the flowers worked. Then Mrs. Finch touched the envelope addressed to Walter's mother. "Your turn." Walter opened it. Inside was a note written by Margaret Bramble. "Dear whoever finds this, I have placed this here because Mr. Pritchard at the station says undelivered letters sometimes find their way back into the world when somebody still needs them. I think that is nonsense. But he seems so certain that I have decided to humor him. I am 28 years old and have been told I may never have children. I thought I did not mind. Today I discovered that I do. So I am writing to someone who does not exist. If I ever have a son or daughter, I hope they know this. You were wanted before I knew your name. And if you are never born, Then I suppose this letter is only paper, but writing it has helped. Margaret Bramble. Walter removed his spectacles. Mrs. Finch looked towards the window. After a while, Walter folded the letter. That was worth delivering. Yes, she said. He had known his mother loved him, but there was something different about hearing it from a woman who had not yet met him. A woman sitting somewhere in Willowmere more than 6 decades earlier, writing to a child she thought might never exist. Funny, Walter said. What? How words can arrive at exactly the right age, Mrs. Finch nodded. Perhaps that is what the postbox knows. Don't encourage it, she said. Over the next few days, Walter traced several recipients. One letter went to the daughter of a man who had served at sea. Another went to an elderly woman named Celia Marsh and contained a recipe from her sister. Celia had spent 40 years trying to recreate her sister's apple cake. The missing ingredient was ground almonds. She baked it the next day and brought Walter a slice. It was excellent. Another letter contained only a pressed bluebell. Another, a theatre ticket. Another, a child's drawing of a dog. Some messages explained things, some solved nothing. Some were simply reminders that somebody had once thought of somebody else. Then Walter found a letter addressed to Edith Harrow. It had been written by Daniel Vale as a child. Dear Miss Harrow, I went home like you said. Thank you. Daniel. Walter took it to Rosebank Cottage and placed it on the piano. At that moment, the blank envelope inside his coat became cold. He pulled it out. Writing had appeared. Walter Bramble. Walter sat on the piano stool and opened it. Inside was one sheet. Dear Walter, a post box does not remember letters. People do. The box only holds what we are not ready to lose. You have delivered what needed delivering. There is one final message. It is yours. Stop worrying that quiet lives are small. They are not. A person does not need to travel far to matter. Sometimes all that is required is to stand in the right place when someone has something they need to say. Thank you for listening. There was no signature. Outside, rain began against the window. Walter looked at Edith's piano. He rested one finger on middle C, then E, then G, the old chord. He smiled. He tried the scale Edith had once made him practice. C, D, E, F, G. He made a mistake, stopped, then heard her voice in memory. Again, Walter, but slower. Music is not running away from you. So he began again, slowly. This time, he reached the end. The following Monday, the post box outside Willowmere post office was completely ordinary. Walter leaned close. Nothing. Mrs. Finch stood beside him. Well? Silent. Perhaps it's finished. Perhaps. Are you disappointed? Walter considered it. A little. Inside, he put on the kettle. The sorting bench was covered in ordinary letters, bills, cards, catalogues, a postcard, a parcel containing knitting wool. Walter picked up an envelope. Strange, really? What? All these messages. We treat them as paper. They are paper? Yes. Walter held the envelope towards the window. But not only paper. Outside, Willowmere moved gently through another autumn morning. A bus stopped beside the green. Leaves turned slowly in the road. Somewhere, somebody was writing a letter. Perhaps an apology. Perhaps good news. Perhaps only thinking of you. At noon, a little girl came in with her grandfather. She held a pink envelope. "I need a stamp." "Very important letter?" She nodded. "To my friend." She moved away. Walter showed her the stamps. She chose one with a robin. "Will it definitely get there?" Walter looked towards the old red postbox. For the briefest moment he thought he heard something. Not words, just a faint metallic murmur. Walter smiled. "Yes," he said. "I think it will." The girl posted the letter. Clunk. Later, rain began again. The lamps cast amber pools across the wooden counter. Walter sorted the final letters one by one. And now he held each for perhaps half a second longer. Just enough to remember. Every envelope had left somebody's hand. Every name had been written, because somewhere somebody had thought of someone else. The clock moved towards closing. Nothing hurried. Walter switched off one lamp, then another. Mrs. Finch waited at the door beneath her green umbrella. "Coming?" Walter nodded. They walked home slowly beneath the rain. Behind them, the old red postbox stood beneath the chestnut tree. Quiet, patient, holding its secrets. And somewhere far down inside it came the faintest sound. Not quite a voice, not quite the rain. Only a whisper. As gentle as paper folding, as soft as somebody saying good night. And Willowmere listened. The end.